very happy to welcome as our speaker today Dr. Shreya Gupta. She is an assistant curator at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, working on the refurbishment of the museum's South Asia Gallery. Prior to the V&A, she also worked in the Asia department at the British Museum. She recently completed her PhD from the University of Exeter and Ashmolean Museum on the history of collecting coins in colonial India, and that's the subject of her talk. Her interests lie in the field of provenance research, history of collecting, and the history of knowledge production in colonial India.
My research is on the history of collecting coins by British officials and Indian collectors in the late 19th century to the early to mid 20th century in India. During their postings in South Asia, British colonial officials developed an interest in the so-called missing history of the subcontinent, and they formed coin collections to write this history, which they then deposited in museums in the UK after they returned. Although these collections are named after British collectors, the role of Indian actors in their formation has so far been neglected. My thesis highlights the crucial role of Indians from diverse social backgrounds in forming these collections and advancing numismatic studies. In my research, I have looked at 4 collections of Indian coins that were collected by and named after 4 European coin collectors in colonial India, and the collections are currently held in the Ashmolean, the British Museum, and the Fitzwilliam. Through my research, I highlighted and showed the role of people from India in creating these collections and in producing expert knowledge about the Indian past on their basis. And just to acknowledge that this research was taken under a grant by the Arts and Humanities Research Council and done in collaboration with the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. The way I did so by showing how Indians were involved in every stage of the journey of coins, as they were collected from the ground, bought in the market, and acquired by coins. This is not my own flowchart, so I'm not going to take credit for it, but this is from someone before me who also did a dissertation at Exeter, and she studied how portable antiquities, including coins, transferred from Tamil Nadu to museums and foreign collectors and auction houses. But it's a good way to show the various stages involved in the journey of coins. So we start with coins from the ground or from the riverbed. We move to the ones that are bought in the market through middlemen, agents, jewelers, metal dealers. And then we see how they're acquired by auction houses, collectors, and museums. When we start with coins that are found on the ground, they're often found by accidental finders, such as laborers, farmers, and construction workers, and then move on to agents and middlemen who obtain these coins from accidental finders and then sell them to collectors stationed in various towns in India. I then discussed how Indian scholars, historians, and museum professionals also helped in the interpretation of these coins and the writing of historical narratives from them, as they exchanged letters with European collectors, became part of learned societies, and published catalogues of coins in various Indian museums. So I'm not going to cover all of these processes today, but I just want to give you a brief snapshot into the stories I've uncovered in the past few years. And as we were just discussing, it's possible that you might have heard some bits of this in my earlier talks for the Royal Numismatic Society and British Numismatic Society, so I'm going to try to focus on a different aspect of the research. In the 18th and 19th centuries, British officers arrived in India through their civil service posting. Having studied at Oxford and Cambridge, where education in classics was an important theme, they were fascinated by the story of Alexander and searched for the material remains of his invasion of India, reflecting Orientalist views of the superiority of the Greeks, and particularly Alexander's so-called heroic efforts at bringing civilization to India. In their quest for writing the history of the Greek presence, they turned often to coins. Many of them operated in the northwest region, and over the late 19th century and early 20th century, a network of British coin collectors developed in this area. In my thesis, I looked at the way such collectors interacted with each other, and how through exchange of letters, information, and knowledge about find spots and reading of coins, they very much, somehow like the society we are speaking at today, built collections of coins together and advanced knowledge of ancient Indian history together. Members of this group included people like Richard Bertram Whitehead, who was one of the primary collectors of my research and whose network I have hoped to chart through these visualizations and show how many people in his network were based in Cambridge, in Oxford, and in the Indian Civil Service. Others in his network were Charles James Rogers, who served as the principal of a college in Amritsar in Punjab for 22 years, a position which gave him ample opportunities to further his numismatic interests. Major General H.L. Houghton, a military officer stationed at Kohat in the northwestern frontier province, who specialized in Bactrian numismatics, H.T.S. Short, who later became curator of the Salisbury South Wales and Blackmore Museum, and archaeologists and scholars like John Marshall, who became the Director General of the Archaeological Survey in 1902. These people all worked for British government in different capacities, which promoted their access to coins in various ways. They also mostly bought coins from a plethora of coin dealers stationed in towns like Rawalpindi, Peshawar, and Sialkot, who were able to procure coins from Afghanistan and supply them to officials posted in Punjab. No wonder one of the British coin collectors described Punjab as an ideal hunting ground for the coin collector. These coin dealers became the primary route through which collectors formed their collections. And as Whitehead said, he soon found that he could not make a good collection without recourse to the Rawalpindi dealers. Dealers, however, operated in all major centers of trade and British presence in colonial India. They were one of these many Indian groups that British collectors relied on, both for coin supplies and for accompanying information, and whom they also regarded through racialized lenses. Skilled businessmen and intelligent in running coin businesses, I want to speak today about their interactions with British collectors. I want to move here to Western India and speak of many such Indian dealers and intermediaries who helped European collections form their collections in the bazaars and markets of Bombay. Prominent amongst those helping collectors buy coins were money changers from the Marwadi community who had established businesses in the bazaars of Bombay. They were a successful business community within the Bania group who during the transition to colonial rule had migrated to port cities in British India, including Bombay. And you can see some contemporary depictions of them through postcards and lithographs here. We learn about how to buy coins from these people in bazaars from someone who writes under the name of Cryptopolis in Times of India. And despite this somewhat futuristic-sounding echoing name, this was likely just Charles Rogers who was writing under a pseudonym in the newspaper. Cryptopolis has a flair for writing, so this next slide is going to have some heavy words involved. He writes that at the Marwadis, you're more likely to get good value for your money compared to larger establishments of professional art dealers, where, quote, the ostentatious ignorance of globe-trotting plutocracy has leagued with the innate cupidity of the native showman to enhance the price of generally worthless articles. Given the presence of British people in the region who were interested in Indian wares and paintings, a significant number of these large establishments had been set up in large cities with a significant British presence, such as the presidency towns of Bombay, Madras, and Calcutta. However, Charles Rogers advises that these staring plate glass windows of the European shops, with all their gaudy displays of Indian wares, manufactured strictly for European consumption, must actually be shunned by the serious coin collector. Instead of going to these shops that cater to European customers, he should instead go to the Marwadi Bazaar, where he will find an ancient Marwadi weighing his hard-earned gains and noting them with unintelligible hieroglyphics in a dirty little account book. The use of hieroglyphics here to refer to the Marwadi's book shows Cryptopolis's frustration with the impenetrability of the bazaar and the Orientalist fashion in which he saw it. In addition, by labeling the account book of this Marwadi dirty, he's bolstering the idea of the dealer's treachery and trickery. But this is not the end, and Cryptopolis offers more tips for collectors to counter these supposed tricks and obtain coins at good prices. He advises the collector not to dress well for buying coins and not reveal his appreciation of coins too much or too soon to increase chances of purchasing them at a lower price. This would trick the Marwadi into thinking he did not come from a wealthy background and sell at cheaper rates. He lastly advises that the best time to visit these bazaars and get a good haul was after the rains, as coins could be washed down and picked up by laborers and brought to bazaar. The series of articles points to the ways in which British collectors could find coins in the bazaars. It also shows that there was a business community who was able to make great use of their pre-existing commercial business of money changing and take advantage of the demand for coins that shot up with the coming of British collectors and deal in older currency, which was no longer legal tender. Indians not only specialized in the dealing of coins, but the demand for coins among British collectors also led to a growing market for numismatic books and catalogues in which Indians found business opportunities. D.B. Tarapurewala Sons and Company were booksellers, newsagents, and stationers working out of Hornby Road in Bombay. Primarily booksellers, they carried extensive stocks of English and American books obtained from London, besides books on Indian and Indian themes. Numismatic books and coins were a small part of this larger business that they carried. The Indo-Portuguese Catholic Brahmin doctor and coin collector Jose Gerson da Cunha also resided at Hornby Road and probably visited Tarapurewala Sons and Company to buy numismatic books. They also produced and distributed postcards, and one of them is this slide on the right, which was produced by the same company. Nicknamed as Kitab Mahal, or the Palace of Books, the firm was established in 1864 as Hormisty Sorabji and Company, and then taken over by three brothers, T.S., V.D., and H.D. Tarapurewala in the 19th century. And it's in this period that they seem to have expanded their clientele to coin collectors. They wrote to the American Numismatic Society, for example, to obtain a copy of Whitehead's book, Pre-Mohammedan Coinage of Northwestern India, which was published by the society, and sell it in their stores. One of the brothers, V.D. Tarapurewala, was likely a coin collector himself. He offered the British collector Alfred Master his duplicate Mughal gold mohurs for selling or for exchanging. He also wrote to the United Provinces-based collector H.R. Neville, describing himself as a keen student of Indian history and inquiring about an unknown title of Jahangir he came across in silver coins. Tarapurewala was aware of coin dealers across the country, and he supplied names of some such dealers, including in Junagadh someone named Nemchand Nata, and another in Lucknow, Gaya Prasad Sambhunath, to Alfred Master as well. So this increasing expansion towards numismatic material among booksellers also reflects the kind of growth of numismatics and the coin trade that's happening in 19th and early 20th century in colonial India, and the ways through which Indians came to offer a diverse array of services to the British collectors who were involved in this trade. There were further other collectors who bought coins through a trusted agent sort of figure, someone who became a regular point of contact for obtaining coins. A good example of someone who used this method was Alfred Master, a British coin collector whose collection is now in the Ashmolean. He joined the Indian Civil Service in 1906 and served as an assistant collector and magistrate in Bombay. Like other British collectors and scholars, his administrative posting had a significant impact on the scholarly work he undertook. His area of specialization was actually linguistics, and especially Gujarati and Marathi, which he must have developed while he was stationed in these regions, where the language was in use. His diary is now housed in the India Office records at the British Library, and in these diaries we see that he speaks about constant visits by a munshi, who helps him with his Gujarati, as well as Urdu and Persian training. The expertise in linguistics that Master developed was thus supported by these local Indian experts, and through this training he brought a linguist's perspective to the study of coins, as well as used coins in his study of linguistics. Master's correspondence is stored in the archives at the Ashmolean, and from them we learn that a frequent source of coins for him was someone named Vrij Vallabh or Vrij Vallabh Pranjivandas Choksi, who was based in Borsad in present-day Gujarat. It is unclear whether Choksi was a professional dealer of coins or Master's agent, because he offers a whole host of services to Master. Choksi sent at least 14 letters to him between 1921 to 22, all dealing with different types of coins. For example, he requested Master to select what he desired and return the rest. On one instance he writes, quote, "Please let me know if you require old Mughal coins with tiger, peacock, and sheep marks. I've got the same." End quote. And amongst his offerings were what he describes as coins of old silver and copper coins of Indian emperors of ancient days, Indian kings and Mughal emperors, old coins of tiger and lamb of the Mughal times, old coins in silver and brass, coins of native states. These are all terms that he uses in his various letters when describing to Master what he has and what he can get for him. At other times, he works almost on Master's own requirement and needs, looking specifically for the type of coins Master was interested in. For example, he writes once, "As for the other coin mentioned in your letter, I hope to send you the same by parcel post." Choksi even traveled to Satara, where Master was based, taking these coins with him, and thus it's possible that he functioned as sort of an intermediary, fulfilling Master's interest in coins, especially from the area of Gujarat, where Choksi was himself based. His knowledge and understanding of the local landscape would have made it easy to collect better specimens at lower prices compared to Master going himself to collect coins in these bazaars and revealing his interest as a coin collector. Master, however, was also not his only customer. Repeatedly, Choksi requests Master to return the coins he did not want so he could sell it to other customers. For example, he also sold coins to Reverend G.P. Taylor, a prominent collector of Mughal coins based in Ahmedabad, and he asked Master for Whitehead's address on learning that the latter was also interested in purchasing old coins. His reach even extended beyond the subcontinent to museums in the UK. In 1921, the British Museum wrote to him about some coins, and we cannot say for certain if the museum ended up buying them because his name does not come up on the online database. But perhaps those here who have more knowledge of the collection might have heard or come across his name in the registers of the archives. A second Indian collaborator of Alfred Master was the Maratha historian Rao Bahadur Datta Rai Balwant Parasnas. And you might have heard of him from Dipesh Chakrabarty's book on Jadunath Sarkar or Prachi Deshpande's book Creative Pasts. Parasnas belonged to a middle-class family of hereditary Parasnis or Persian writers and translators, and his keen interest was in accumulating material for writing the history of the Marathas. A visit to Europe and its museums with the Maharaja of Kolhapur in 1902 inspired Parasnas to establish a museum in Satara, where he was based. In 1912, he approached the Indian government for assistance in establishing this museum, and the Satara Historical Research Society and Museum was founded. It had an extensive collection of historical papers of old Maratha families, Indian paintings, prints of Anglo-Indian statesmen, illustrated books, clothing, inscriptions, antiquities, and maps. But amongst this was also a collection of almost 2,000 coins of the Guptas, Delhi Sultans, Mughals, Lucknow Nawabs, contemporary Indian dynasties, rulers of Vijayanagar, Mysore, and Maratha states, as well as some English medals. And we don't really know how he built this entire collection, which was so wide-ranging, but we have his correspondence with Alfred Master about a few very tiny acquisitions. This is again from the archives in Ashmolean, which have the papers of Alfred Master. Master helped encourage Parasnas' coin collecting interest, and in a letter Parasnas writes to Master that I shall now try to collect old Maratha coins and will write to you from time to time about them. I have traced one or two most valuable finds, and if I succeed in securing them, perhaps I think they will throw additional light on the subject. So through their correspondence, we get this rare glimpse of an Indian collector who reaches out to a British counterpart to source and buy coins. In early 1923, Parasnas received 8 silver and 10 copper coins from Master for 10 rupees that he kept for his museum. He sent Master a check for 50 rupees and said that Master could spend the remaining balance in purchasing interesting coins whenever they will be available. He thus used Master's knowledge and possibly sources of Maratha coins to help augment his own museum's collection. The museum collection was subsequently transferred to the Deccan College in Pune, where it stands today, and a part of it was retained by Parasnas' family. Their relationship is thus an interesting case study, where you see an Indian collector's proficient utilization of his connections with a British collector, in pursuit of the former's goal of building a museum collection and developing the study of Maratha history. As Parasnas wrote, he found in Master, quote, a deep and enlightened scholar and a kind-hearted and sincere friend. The more I came in contact with you, the more I admired your love for numismatics and history. Had you been here for a longer period, we could have certainly done much more work on this neglected field of research. End quote. Through this sort of first half or first intro of the talk, I've given you like a flavor of the various avenues through which British collectors in India were buying coins and building their collections. And now I want to turn your attention to the other end of these coins' journeys, that is, how they came to be acquired and sold to museums in the UK. Through my research, I argue and show that the structures of empire, legal, administrative, and museological, were key to the coin collecting endeavors of British officials. The networks that they formed through these structures were also responsible for the transfer of large collections of South Asian coins to museums in the UK. In the late 19th and early 20th century, two new heritage legislation came to be introduced in India: the Treasure Trove Act of 1878 and the Ancient Monument Preservation Act of 1904. In addition, this period also saw the growth of a growing nationalist movement in India. And as such, legislation attempted to control the official movement of Indian antiquities from India to abroad, and a growing Indian nationalist movement created unfavorable views towards these antiquities leaving the country. UK museums were looking for alternative sources for coins. And it was here that collections formed by such private collectors came in handy and convenient, as many of them had formed good working relationships with museum staff in the UK, and which motivated them to deposit their coins in various UK museums. The slide is just a glimpse of some of the early sources from which the British Museum got its Indian coin collections. The relationships formed between collectors and museum personnel played a decisive role in the acquisition of coins, and the imperial climate at play lurking in the background made the process of the transfer of these coins a comparatively smooth one. Such networks became the means through which UK museums expanded their South Asian coin collection. The second half is focused mainly on registers and reports and department minutes found in the British Museum's coin room. And as Helen Wang and Elizabeth Errington have shown, there was a growing increase in acquisition of South Asian coins from 19th to early 20th century in the British Museum, which were both dependent on and reflected the increasing advancement in the discipline of Indian numismatics at this time, both in India and in Britain. With growing acquisition from the 1850s to roughly the 1920s, the British Museum was indicating its interest in furthering the study of what it called Oriental coin collections. Collectors of South Asian coins could be assured that their collections would find a proper and safe home at the British Museum. From the collector's perspective, it is also useful to think here of the ideas of home prevalent amongst the British community in India. Scholars have argued that for British members of the imperial machinery, home always meant their national homeland, Britain. Despite spending many years in India, British officers retained a strong sense of personal connection to Britain. They often planned to be in India only temporarily. They were thus more committed to developing museums in this home rather than in India. Further, once they returned from India, colonial officials often found that the salaries that had been able to support a comfortable lifestyle in India was not enough to sustain the cost of living back home. Selling the collections amassed in India, as Whitehead did, for instance, for a large sum of £3,500, and this was in 1922, this could considerably ease this financial burden. It was thus quite common for those involved in the British Empire to sell their objects after their return. So a combination of financial need, commitments to their homeland, and the availability of coins motivated British officers to donate objects to UK museums. As heritage laws tightened in the early 20th century in India, these returning ex-imperial officials became a good opportunity for UK museums to expand their collections. The dependency of museums in the opposite case on such officer is clear from the opposite case. So British Burma, for instance, had fewer British civil servants compared to India, because of which there were fewer people interested in collecting objects from the region and bringing them back to Britain. And this is research that Alexandra Green has shown in the case of Burma. So I want to show these processes through the case study of the acquisition of another collector's coins by the British Museum. This is Henry Nelson Wright, a founding member of the Numismatic Society of India. Wright was based in central India, starting his civil service posting from 1890 in the northwest provinces and united provinces of Agra and Awadh. He collected coins of the Delhi Sultanate and Mughal rulers, and they are distributed now between the British Museum in London and in India, the Delhi Museum, which most likely is now the museum which is in the Red Fort in Old Delhi. The latter holds his coins of the Delhi Sultans. His Gupta and Mughal coins are mostly in the British Museum. When we chart acquisition histories or history of collecting, we tend to focus on this big acquisition of large items. But this focus on provenient collectors and collections can sometimes be illusionary, as it tends to distract from those collectors who might have shared more stronger relationships with the museum over a longer period of time. For example, due to the frequency of small donations, Nelson Wright's contribution can literally be lost in a long list of donors and collectors in the British Museum's acquisition registers. And this is in comparison to Whitehead. And if you go in the coin rooms, you'll see that there are acquisition registers where the entirety of the register is dedicated to Whitehead's coins. But this is not the case with Nelson Wright. However, acquisition of Wright's coins, although lesser in the number of specimens, they're spread across a wide range of time, starting from 1909 till the time of his death in 1941, when there is also a bequest made to the museum. And as Isabel MacDonald has shown, sources who gave or sold large collections to a museum can be easily identified. But those who facilitated smaller but more repeated acquisitions might have had in reality more significant relationships with the museum, and argue that this is true for Wright, whose relationship with the British Museum spanned the first 4 decades of the 20th century. This is just the range of coins that the museum acquired from him between 1900 to 1915. And unlike some collectors who would come back to the UK and then decided to sell their coins to museums or auction them off, Wright's presentations and sales of coins began much earlier, when he was still working in various roles in India. In the first decade of the 20th century, Wright's coins were acquired by the British Museum in comparatively smaller quantities. And at this time, he was also producing the catalogue of coins in the Asiatic Society of Bengal and the Indian Museum in Calcutta. In the preface of the second volume of this catalogue, he acknowledges the help of British Museum's coins and medals department staff. He thanks E.J. Rabson, numismatist and Sanskrit professor, as well as the British numismatist and antiquary Herbert Appold Gruber and keeper of the museum's coin department from 1906 to 12. This time that he spent interacting with the British Museum staff and taking their help would have helped him develop good relationships with them, and this could have had an influence in his decision to deposit his coins at the British Museum. But if you see in this list, there is one big acquisition in 1910 for £175 for coins of the Guptas. And I want to sort of take a little bit of a deeper dive into this one. In 1910, the museum purchased an important series of around 70 Gupta coins from Wright for £175. And the arguments put forth for acquiring these coins by the department's keeper, Herbert Appold Gruber, gives insights into the museum's priorities. This is from the report that he drafted when acquiring these coins. He measures the value of Wright's collection firstly in relation to collections in 2 other large museums in India and Britain. He terms the series, quote, one of the most complete ever formed by a private collector, and said to be surpassed only by the collections in the British Museum and the India Museum, end quote. Gruber was thus able to demonstrate the high quality of Wright's Gupta coins, and as it expanded its South Asian holdings in the early 20th century, this acquisition would have thus seemed an attractive one to the British Museum. The acquisition of Wright's Gupta collection was also key in pushing the museum to publish its catalogue of the Gupta coins in 1914, as Robert Bracey has also shown. Wright's collection fulfilled also an educational and scholarly role, as it would help in studying other Gupta coins that were already present in the collection. Gruber argued that for many types of coins, the museum did not have sufficient specimens to complete the legends, as only part of them were visible. The legends were remarkably clear, he said, in Wright's coins, making it easy to read legends on various types of Gupta coins, some of which had not yet been satisfactorily deciphered. The report, Gruber writes, then goes on to give a detailed comparison, wherein coin types from Wright's Gupta collection are compared with existing specimens of that type in the British Museum, showcasing how they would be useful in studying the former. Wright's collection was thus like a missing piece in a crossword, which once found could help experts decode the remaining puzzle. The sum of £175 to be spent on this purchase was justified through these various rationales. Acquisitions of Wright's coins by the British Museum then continued in the second decade of the 20th century, with frequent small purchases, but there is a small break of 20 years from 1915 until the next of Wright's coins were acquired in 1935. Why he stopped donating between 1915 and 1935 is something I haven't yet figured out, but if anyone has any suggestions or clues, do let me know. Amongst this period, the only thing he gave was a gilt bronze specimen of the Nelson Wright Medal of the Numismatic Society of India, which was named after him, and he gave this to the museum in 1919. It's also possible that in this period, the museum's purchasing capacity was perhaps affected by the damages caused in the First World War. But Wright returned to Britain in 1925 after his retirement, and he bought a house in Upper Warlingham which was chosen specifically for its proximity to London, so he could frequent the British Museum to catalogue their coins. During this time, with more leisure and his job over, Wright would visit the museum regularly, helping catalogue coins in the study room. And this is when acquisition of Wright's coins started again in 1935, lasting up until 1941. During this period, he visited the museum often, and thus would have considered it a good choice for donating his coins, especially as it enjoyed premier status as the hub for the study of Indian coins in the UK. And then lastly, after his death, he also left his coins to the British Museum, and thus his coins were acquired through a bequest in 1941 through the help of his second wife, Minnie Barnes. Amongst these were his collection of small coins and Nizar pieces of the Mughal emperors. The role of women in transferring their family collections, including not just coins, was quite crucial. You saw earlier in this slide the collection that is acquired from Sarah Sophia Banks, one of the very prominent women collectors of Indian coins. And Wright's wife, Minnie Barnes, also gave materials from his library to the museum. This included Wright's catalogue of the India Museum and the Delhi Museum, and the catalogues of Lucknow and Lahore Museum, besides several other books and pamphlets of Indian coins. Here you can see her name written in one of such books found in the coin room. In official reports, it is mentioned that the coins were to be acknowledged to Mrs. H. Nelson Wright, the largest Upper Warlingham Surrey, but her contribution is not in the database, and we can only see it through a book on the proceedings of the Numismatic Society of India, which I've shown here, and which bears her name on the opening page. Minnie would have been aware of Wright's strong relationship with the British Museum, especially given his regular visits there to catalogue its collection, and it's possible that this motivated her to also give his books to the British Museum. Through the second half, what I'm trying to show is how crucial personal relationships were in acquisitions of coins from South Asia, and how they became the backbones on which objects from South Asia reached UK museums. Collectors like Nelson Wright, R.B. Whitehead all shared personal, good working relationships with the British Museum staff, and you can see them either in the letters they exchanged with them, in the time they spent in the British Museum coin room, or in the fact that in their catalogues they often thanked the British Museum staff for their help, for reading proofs, for help with electrotypes and plates, etc. And these kind of relationships often dictated how they decided to sell or give their coins to particular UK museums. For instance, R.B. Whitehead not only gave coins to the British Museum, he gave a small batch also to the Fitzwilliam. And this was because he was based himself in Cambridge and regularly visited Fitzwilliam to look at its coin collection. So these kind of relationships tied collectors and museums into networks of obligation, which were often crucial in persuading collectors to give their collections. In the growing anti-imperial climate of the early 20th century, these relationships helped museums acquire more coins and indeed other objects from South Asia. And through this entire presentation, what I've tried to give you is a glimpse of the many kind of Indian actors that helped British collectors form coin collections in colonial India. These ranged from businessmen in the Bombay bazaars that collectors would buy coins from, professional coin dealers who often worked as intermediaries or agents, buying coins at request and according to needs, as well as historians and collectors who were able to use these collections formed, exchange them with each other, and help advance the study of Indian numismatics and history. The aim of my research has been thus to highlight how Indians were not incidental but essential to the process of coin collecting in colonial India. That's it. Thank you.